Hello, I'm Peter Reinhardt, and welcome to Pizza Quest. This is one of my favorite recurring episodes. We meet with Mark Todd, the cheese dude, every now and then for another crash course education in a particular type of cheese. So, Mark, welcome back to Pizza Quest. It's so good to see you. I see that you are coming to us from the Russian River area of Sonoma County, your home base. Out your window, I'm seeing a bunch of trees that it's kind of like a mushroom forest back behind you, right?
Absolutely. I live in a temperate rainforest that I've lived here 30 some years, and I think the most I've ever recorded was 108 inches of rain one year. So it's wet, definitely.
Now, what's it looking like for this year or this past year? What was the number?
Well,
Rain.
we had the season starts here in September, and between September and after Christmas, we had about 40 inches of rain and awesome mushroom crop early in the season, and then it pretty much quit raining, and California decided to enter into dry January with the rest of the country, and we haven't seen a drop of rain since about the 30th of December, so they're kind of slowing down. But this weekend, we're supposed to get another big atmospheric river come through with another 10, 12 inches of rain in the hills, and that'll just kick up another whole season going.
Another wave of new growth mushrooms too, right?
Absolutely. Probably this time of year, we'll probably still be getting chanterelle. We were getting the winter chanterelle yellow called yellow tubies, and hedgehogs this time of year, we'll still be getting those. Probably a few others too, but it's been a great season so far. I've picked baskets and baskets full of mushrooms this year.
And we've talked briefly about this in other episodes that you've been on, where that in addition to your expertise in the cheese world, where you are the cheese dude after all, and worked, and this is how you pay the bills too, but also that you're a an avid mushroom hunter, and as we say, there are old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old bold mushroom hunters. So what keeps you going? How did you before we get into cheeses, how did you, especially with these new mushrooms popping up this year that you've never seen before, how do you know the good ones from the ones that'll kill you?
Well, that's what study and not knowing the area, knowing what's likely to grow. When you get new ones, you just have to get your book out and run through the key that tells you if this, then this, if this, then not this, if not this, then this. Go down the whole list of things you're supposed to check. And when you get done, it tells you what mushroom you've got. If it's one that they say, well, there's this one that could kill you, or it could be this one that's really tasty. Those, you just go, well, I wonder what that tastes like. Pull it out. Um, but most of the mushrooms that I pick, and I pick about 27 that I eat on a regular basis, they're real easy to tell. There's not very easy ways to mess them up if you just follow the rules. I have no desire to die of mushroom poisoning,
Right.
any more than I have a desire to die of food poisoning. But I will take risks with mushrooms and with food because no risk, no reward.
And the reward with these mushrooms is not like anything you can buy from the store.
That's it. The a rule of thumb for most mushroom pickers, the foragers, is if it's not better than a portobello, why bother picking it?
Huh?
There's a lot of mushrooms that are edible, but they don't really taste that good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you can go to the grocery store Safeway and buy portobello mushrooms that taste better than what you're spending hours hiking through the mountains looking for, why do that?
Yeah.
So the ones that we picked, like the chanterelle and the Boletus edulis and craterellus, the horn of plenty, those mushrooms are stunningly tasty. I mean, really, really flavorful.
Well, after this new rain comes through that you're expecting, if you get a bumper crop, we'd love to have you come back and just we'll spend a whole episode on just mushrooms instead of on cheeses, and maybe you could walk us through some of the harvest that you get
Sure.
and what you do with them, like some of the dishes that you make from them and how you
Absolutely.
prepare them. We love that.
And preserving them is a big part of it because it's like getting a crop of radishes or something. They all come in at once. And what do you do with them? Well, you can pickle this and you can dry this, and the learning the methods of preservation is another whole study. And food preservation is actually what got me interested in cheese in the first place, because
Interesting.
cheese is milk's leap to immortality. It starts out as this fluid that will die in days, and turns into this product you can stick in a cave and leave it for a decade. How did we figure that out when we were still banging rocks together?
Exactly. How did we figure it out?
A lot of trial and error. I'll tell you that, man. A lot of trial and error.
And many, many generations of trial and error to get us to the point we are today, which is kind of again, and like pizza and other things we talk about, kind of we're in a golden age of cheeses. It seems like the however many there are. How many types of cheeses would you say? I think that doesn't France have something like 520 certified cheeses?
There's there's no number that I've ever seen. Charles de Gaulle made a quote in the 60s about how can any one man rule a country with over 600 cheeses.
Yeah.
So they have 6, 7, 8, who knows. The U.S. makes more than that now. The U.S. makes probably over 1,000 different cheeses. But the thing is, when you say different, what do you mean different? If I take a recipe and all these cheese names, all the original cheese names, Parmesan, cheddar, Gruyere, those are all recipes that tell a cheesemaker exactly what to do to replicate this cheese. The only difference is your starting material, where the milk came from in the world, and the expertise of the maker, how good they are at their craft. And so 1,000 people can make the same cheese in different parts of the world and come out with 1,000 different cheeses.
Different results. Which is, in a sense, what we're saying is that to turn milk into cheese, you have to ferment it. You have to apply biological processes to it to transform it into something else that solidifies, that gets better with age or changes with age. And that's a craft. That's a incredibly difficult craft.
Humans figured out a long time ago, and we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, that what makes things go bad is moisture and sugar. Anything that has sugar in it and water in it, bacteria will eat. So we figured out if you get the water out or the sugar out, there's less for the bacteria to eat on. And then you have to worry about other things that can cause it to go bad. But the basic building block of food preservation is removing water, reducing the moisture content, and changing the pH so that it is inhospitable to the bacteria and the things you don't want to grow.
The bad bacteria,
exactly that.
The bacteria that are detrimental, but the process itself requires bacteria. I mean,
yes,
fermented cheeses and milk is bacterial fermentation.
Cheese is basically imitating in a vat what goes on in the stomach of a small animal. We are allowing the milk to transform into its component parts of fat, protein, water, and sugar. And that's what happens in the stomach of an animal. That's why we use rennet, which is derived from the stomach of a calf or a goat or a sheep. And that rennet, that enzyme, converts the proteins into such that they can become solid pieces. It's complex. I don't want to get involved.
No, but it's fascinating stuff. And of course, fermentation as a category is fascinating to millions of people these days. It's we've had Sandor cats and we've talked fermentation here and we love everything that happens under that umbrella. And of course, I deal with it with bread dough and breads and pizza doughs, and winemakers deal with it.
It's a third of the calories that humans eat.
Really?
That's the approximate. It's about a third of the calories that humans consume are in some way, shape, or form fermented. From coffee, chocolate, cheese, bread, wine, beer. I mean, the list is just fermented.
I'm surprised it's only 1/3. I know in my case, I'm thinking it's probably 2/3.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, Peter, I've started encroaching on your territory for a change.
Yeah.
Yeah. After everybody else did baking during COVID, I didn't. I started baking about 3 weeks ago. I decided that I want to make seeded sourdough bread that's as good as what I can buy at my local artisan bakery store. And I got to tell you,
You live in sourdough country too. I mean, that's, the San Francisco, Northern California coast where you live is one of the best places to make sourdough bread. What do you got? What do you got there to show us? Oh, there's a loaf. Oh my God, that's a gorgeous loaf.
made that one yesterday.
Fantastic. And
My own sourdough starter.
your own
Redwood sourdough starter.
What kind of flour did you use?
I used I did a 900-gram total and did 800 grams of King Arthur bread flour and 100 grams of the King Arthur whole wheat flour.
So kind of like a levain, a pan au levain, in a way.
Right. And my starter culture is now 5 weeks old. It's vigorous. It's all get out.
Fantastic.
And I even named it, since I'll never sell it. Sonoma 7-seed sourdough. It has 7 different seeds in it, and my tagline is "Sail the 7 seeds." So when you see it on the market, you'll know it was me.
That's great. Well, for those who are able to watch this on our video version, they could see the beautiful loaf you held up. Those who are just listening on the audio version, Mark held up a gorgeous round sourdough loaf with a little char. It looked like he baked it, as they say, bien cuit, to well done.
Yes.
That's some nice color on there, and sounds like that's an uncut loaf. Have you cut one and tasted the results?
Yep. Here.
So he's going to get us one now to look at that's already been cut. So again, we're living in the realm of fermentation right now. We're talking wheat fermentation and bread. Oh, that's a gorgeous crumb that you got. There's huge open holes. What, do you happen to know what kind of a hydration level you were using? How much percentage?
The flour starts at 12.7. But I don't know what the finish is, because I live in a land that's basically a humidor.
Yeah, very, very humid. But how much water did you add to your 900 grams?
600 milliliters of water for 900 grams of flour, and about probably 30 mil or 40 mil added when I was, getting my hands wet to work the dough, and adding the salt. I added the salt separately.
You're getting pulled down the rabbit hole of bread now. We're gonna.
Oh, I'll tell you, that's my fifth batch, and I'm pretty much where I'm happy with it. And it amazed me how easy it was to get to this point, but how much that opened the porthole to, like cheese, 1,000 different varieties.
Exactly, and it is like cheese. The varieties are infinite, and the challenge is, of course, replicating it. You live in an area where you're dealing with, a living organism, your starter, and your climate is volatile, to say the least. You're north of where all the big fires are happening this year, but a few years ago it was
the rainforest. We rarely get fires here. The redwoods don't burn much.
And you didn't get any fire. Like when I was in Sonoma County back around 5 years ago, big fire were up the river to at least to Santa Rosa. None of it got to where you are. You're west of Santa Rosa.
Yeah, there's the pretty much the world changes about 5 to 7 miles west of Santa Rosa. It goes from open oak woodlands and grasslands into redwood forests and Doug fir. And so the hills along the coast are completely different topography than what goes on in the rest of the state.
We call that the West County, right?
It's West County. Yeah, we're West County out here.
Yeah, and up to the coast. And I mean, I lived out there. I loved it.
Oh, yeah.
We were just on that edge. The one thing that we were not immune to, and I'm guessing that you're also vulnerable to, is flooding, though. You don't get fires, but you can get floods.
Well, let's put it this way. If my house floods, San Francisco's underwater.
You're in big trouble. Yeah, because you're up on a hill, right?
I'm about 350 feet up the hill from the river. So what has happened about 4 times since I've lived here 30-some years is I've been flooded onto the hill where you can't get off. There's no exits.
You just gotta wait for it to recede. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a day or two, it's gone.
I was there for the flood of '86, we call it.
Oh my gosh.
That was one of the biggies. And
that is
Guerneville and Monte Rio were underwater to some extent.
number one. biggest flood in recorded history in Montreal in the Russian River.
Well,
I was here for one that was within a half an inch of that, but not the 86 flood. I moved here 4 years after that.
okay, so you missed that, but that flood, we opened our restaurant and bakery about 4 weeks after the flood damage cleared, and so I date my my ascent into the bread world with that flood because that's what we launched right after that. Not because of it,
And,
but we were
and I'm
lucky to
sure
get
you
the
were
doors open.
swamped because everybody needed bread, man, and you were open.
And we filled the need. We saw it and filled it.
That's it, man.
But,
Henry J.
well, Raj, I really want to dive into these cheeses. Mark, in previous episodes, you've taken us through pasta filata, the mozzarella style cheeses, the pulled cheeses. You've taken us through cheddar cheese, one of my favorite episodes because I'm crazy over cheddar cheeses. We did hard cheeses. I think we did an episode with Parmesan and Romano, a couple of the various hard cheeses. And for those who were listening, go back to our archives and listen to some of those if you want. We're not going to repeat everything that we talked about there, but there's certainly some repetition in the category. But now we worked our way up to kind of like, like with wine, you start with the whites and you work to the reds. Now we've worked, I think today we're calling today's episode, is it smelly cheeses or stinky cheeses? What's the right term?
You can call them whatever you want. If you're in the business, we call them washed-rind cheeses.
Washed-rind cheeses, and
Because
washed-rind is what gives it that
exactly. Gives it that potency, that aroma, that smell. These cheeses are, as you say, when you start out eating cheese, you start out with mild cheddar and Havarti and Monterey Jack because they're mild and cream cheese. And as you build your flavors up, you get stronger and stronger. There's two ends of the spectrum. One of them is blue cheeses. The other end is the stinky cheeses. And the washed rind or the stinkies, even some serious cheese people don't like them. They very much separate people. You either love them or you're really not fond of them.
Well, I think it's important, maybe not if you're just a neophyte, to not start with them because I remember the first time I had one, the first time I had like a, I forget which one it was probably a Limburger or something, it blew my head off and I went, whoa, but now I crave it.
Absolutely. It's just like anything else. Once you build a flavor for it, only that flavor will satisfy. There's things like sushi. If you're hungry for sushi, nothing in the world tastes like sushi except sushi. And with these stinky cheeses, these are cheeses that people that are into them will drive miles and miles and miles out of their way to find the stores that have just the ones they like. These cheeses are really ancient too.
Yeah.
They're referred to often as monastery cheeses because the monks in Europe were the ones who really originated them and spread them throughout the cheese-making world. There's debate as to whether it was an accident or an intention, but basically a Benedictine monk in the Alsace-Lorraine region doing his diligence of trying to keep mold off the cheese would take his little wash, which was either alcohol like beer or wine, diluted, or salt water, or both, and rub the cheeses to keep the mold off. And he noticed that mold was coming back on one, so he would scrub it and scrub it and scrub it. And 3 or 4 days later, the mold's back, so he would scrub it again. And God, this one which would not quit, and it molded again, and it molded again. And about the 5th time it molded, he had kept the cheese so moist with his cleaning that it had encouraged different bacteria completely to grow on the outside of the cheese because of the moist environment. That had not happened before. And this young monk went to his boss and said, dude, hey boss, come here. What's up? And boss said, dude, you made it, you taste it. And the next, it's all history after that. It created in the you're a food science guy too, I know. And the food science that goes on inside wash rind cheeses is probably second only to the Maillard reaction as far as the complexity of the chemistry that goes on the surface of that cheese. There are really hundreds of these created.
How these biological processes transform the ingredients from one thing into something else.
Yes,
and the result is unique flavors that are
absolutely
from the milk.
And these different the bacteria, the orange rind ones that show up like on your taleggio,
Yeah.
that you can see very distinctly. Um, that orange rind. Oh, pop them out of your plastic, dude. Get them out of the plastic. Let them breathe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did. I didn't open it. I just wanted to keep it covered, uh, so that my room doesn't fill up with the aroma. I'm holding up a taleggio right now with the
There
orange
you
rind.
go.
So let's talk about the four cheeses we're going to taste today. Is that you got the same one there, or
Yep.
one like it? What
Yeah, they're all.
we're going to do four cheeses, and you'll tell us what order to do them in. We've got a
Yes.
taleggio, which is definitely a washed rind. Well, they're all washed rinds, but it's very soft. Almost,
That's the strongest
it's the strongest of the flavors.
of the groups.
When I went to the market at Whole Foods, and you had already called them ahead and told them I was coming,
Yeah.
they had them waiting for me, and he said, "Oh, you got some pretty strong cheeses there." And when he handed me the taleggio, he says, "Are you ready for this?" I've got in front of me also a Swiss raclette.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so I'm going to open that one up. The rack. Now, most of us know raclette as being kind of one of those cheeses that is held over a heat lamp, and it kind of turns into instant fondue. But right now, this is in a solid form.
Right.
And I guess I'm not seeing much rind. They either shaved off the rind or
Usually, if it's the Swiss version, they buff the rind before it leaves the country. Usually,
and
but
it's got a very deep aroma, but not nearly as potent as the
right.
as the.
And then the next one you've got there should be the cave age Gruyere.
I've got my Gruyere right here. I've got a small piece of Gruyere, cave aged. So so not all Gruyere is cave aged, I guess.
Correct. And
Cave aging, what does that do to the Gruyere that changes it from a regular Gruyere?
well, if you think about, we've been making cheese for thousands of years. We've only had a refrigerator for about 150 or 200 years. Before we had refrigerators, you had to find the coldest place you could find to store your cheese. And if you were lucky enough to have caves in the mountains near you, those caves were cold. And so they stored cheeses in the caves. That's why Switzerland's got all these huge cheeses. They had caves to store them in and keep them cold. If you age it in a cave and you get more than about 50 feet underground, it's around 52 degrees, give or take. And so that was aging temperature. Well, we invented refrigerators. Now aging temperature is 34 to 40. Cheese reacts just like bread. Different things happen at different temperatures.
Yeah.
And sometimes completely different bacteria and different things form that are not available at temperature A, but they're prevalent in temperature B. And that's why cave aging produces completely different flavors than you get from refrigerator aged cheese.
Interesting. And would the difference in the flavors would be a more complexity, more nuance? What is the difference?
It's more intensity, more complexity, typically fruitier, or a much broader range of aromas and flavors in cave aged cheeses than in refrigerated cheeses. Cheddar is the one that shows it probably strongest of anything.
It's amazing. I think maybe we should back up for a second and talk a little bit about the science. We talk about bacteria a lot. What is the bacteria doing to the milk to transform the flavor profile of that milk?
There's two aging processes that go on. One of them, the primary one in most cheese, is the protein structure itself breaking down. You start with casein, the protein that is in milk, and depending upon the bacteria you put in, the temperature, the moisture you leave in, all of those factors, those bacteria will go to work on that protein and break it into smaller and smaller pieces. And each one of those smaller pieces is a new, unique molecule and may add positively or negatively to the flavor and aroma of the cheese. The other thing that happens is fat breaks down over time. It's called lipolysis. And that is responsible for a lot of the flavors that we associate with blue cheeses. Blue cheese is more dependent upon lipolysis, on the fat part of it breaking down, than it is upon the protein breaking down. So those are the two processes that go on as cheese ages. The starter culture you put into it goes in and chews up the component molecules of the fat and protein and creates new and unique um, compounds, new
Is it
molecules that create the different flavors.
is it also seeking out sugars from the milk, like lactose, and
That,
converting those sugars?
that's the first thing it looks for, and that's why cheese um, it's not 100% lactose free overnight, but it's pretty doggone low once you invert it.
Because it chews up the lactose and
That's the first thing it goes for because that's the easiest.
so in bread making, we always say that, the bacteria, usually we call them lactose, lactobacillus organisms, they go for the sugar,
Yeah.
and the result is acid, that it excretes lactic acid as a result. So that happens with the cheese as well, right?
Absolutely.
And then that lactic acid, does that act as a preservative, for the other facets of it that slows down the
It also
breakdown?
acts as a coagulant. It helps in the coagulation.
Coagulant. Oh,
Mhm.
well, this is good. So we're starting to get a picture of the magic
Right.
of what's happening. The cheese that we eat on our pizza has gone through a very unique and complex number of
What to make
aids.
cheese, you take milk, you heat it to a certain temperature, whatever your recipe calls for. It's usually warmer than body temperature for a cow, but some are not. Uh, and then you heat it to that temperature. Then the first thing you add to it is called the starter culture. The starter culture is the mix of bacteria, like Streptococcus, Lactobacillus, and all those different types of bacteria. Very specific strains, very controlled strains in intensity and in volume. You add those to the milk; those go in and eat all the sugar immediately. That's the first thing they do, and they acidify the milk. Depending on your recipe for the cheese, you will wait until that pH level goes down to, at the high end, maybe 5.8, 5.9. At the low end, 4.9, 5.0 for things like feta. So it gets down into that acidic level, and that is what
pH goes down, the acid goes up, basically. Yes.
exactly, and that is one of the key um, target, probably the most important target in all of cheese making is to get to the proper pH.
And of course, nowadays the cheesemakers have tools to gauge that, whereas in the old days they just had their intuition, their touch, their experience, the craft, and the taste.
That's where this is what used to tell them where it was. Yeah,
that was their lab. Get them out. Yeah,
and I'm sorry, but humans have been doing this for a long time, and our taste buds are really good. And if you train them right, you can taste most of the stuff you need to taste. Not all of it, obviously, but humans today think that we can only make food in sterile science environments.
yeah.
Humans have been eating food that was made in the back of a barn for thousands of years, man. And I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
But if push came to shove, I wouldn't turn it away if I was starving to death either.
Well, it's just like with mushrooms. If you know what you're doing, you can live through it and have some joy. Yeah. And if you don't know what you're doing, watch out. One more cheese that we're going to actually taste today, Mark. I'm up here, and this is called the Willoughby.
Yes.
This is from Jasper Hill Farms. I've just recently, learned about the Willoughby because I've been using Jasper Hill Farms for some classes I've been doing, and this has the look of a small little camembert or brie, but without the fuzz around it.
Exactly. And that actually is how the original washed-rind cheese was developed. That one that I told you the guy scrubbed a bunch.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a brie style cheese. It was in that brie style type of cheese that was the original washed-rind. And by the way, they named it because it was from the monastery, so they called it monastery cheese. Which that's Munster. That's where Munster came from.
Oh,
the name Munster means monastery.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah.
So
that is original.
If he hadn't washed off all the mold that was forming, would it have turned into a brie or a camembert style cheese?
Yep. Yeah, that's what it was supposed to be. That's so these cheeses have the same white mold that brie has on it, but it has the bacteria, the orange brinded bacteria called Brevibacteria then create that orange rind, and they pretty much take over the outside.
And that makes a much more almost funkier flavor than
Yes.
the white. The brie is pretty mild. You can, it's a very mild cheese.
Brie's mild. Camembert is not.
Oh, is that right? Even though they look similar.
They're the same cheese, but they're made with different milk and different protein and fat content.
Well,
Talked about how protein breaking down is what gives cheese its flavor. One of the big things.
yeah.
The more protein in your cheese, the more flavor it will develop over time. The more fat in your cheese, the buttery the flavor will be. So brie, like double or particularly triple creme brie, triple creme means 75% butterfat.
Oh, yeah.
By dry weight.
Yeah.
So it's 3/4 of a stick of butter.
Yeah.
If Camembert is always 50-50, half fat, half protein. So as it ages, it develops much stronger flavors than brie does, because of the difference in the fat content and the difference in the animals and where they live. The cows on the coast eat salt grass. That gives you Camembert. Cows in the middle of the country, east of Paris, eat high terrain grass, very mild. That gives you brie.
That's incredible, because you have a place not far from where you live called the Sonoma Marin Cheese Factory, and they sell something called brie, and they sell something called Camembert, and they have a third one which doesn't have the fuzz on it, that looks a lot more like the Willoughby, but it's all from the same. I think they're cheating in their terminology, because they're not making a true Camembert or a true brie, since they all start out the same. I think that they just give the titles based on the size of the round.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Have you taken a tour through there?
I will say that the brie and the Camembert, that Marin French cheese makes, they do all start with the same milk.
Yeah.
The difference primarily is that all of their Camembert is done with single creme, meaning 50-50. It's just regular milk, whole milk. The brie is almost always either double or triple creme.
Oh, so they do differentiate.
So it is a different product. If you get one of their single creme brie and their single creme Camembert, they are the same freaking cheese. If you get it before it molds, they call it breakfast cheese, or Le Petit Déjeuner, the little breakfast. And it's an unripened brie, and they're wonderful cheeses too, just very different.
Yeah, yeah, and they look a lot more like the Willoughby, but the Willoughby doesn't smell anything like their breakfast cheese. This is
right.
Pretty potent stuff.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, why don't we kind of do a little tasting through these, and for folks who are following along and want to try to taste along with us, we've got an 8 cave-aged Gruyere, right? We've got a Jasper Farms, which is a Vermont cheese company. Jasper Farms Willoughby is that the name they gave it? Yes. Is that a classic name? Okay, that's their Willoughby.
All the names were originally names people gave them.
Well, true, yeah, but I mean, there's not a category of Willoughby.
No,
he's okay. And then there's the Taleggio, which is the one with the most orange rind, and it's very soft, very similar in softness to the Willoughby.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the Gruyere, the Cajun, and then
raclette.
The raclette. So where do you want to start?
Raclette. Okay. Raclette is the mildest one of the group.
Okay, I'm going to put the raclette on my cutting board and cut myself off a piece. Is that what I should do?
Yep. And how long's it been out of the fridge?
It's been out a couple of hours now.
Good. Perfect.
Cool, but not warm.
So now
holding up a piece.
Yep. Yeah, and yours still has a little rind on it, I see. Nice.
I see. Well, some of this rind, it looks like it's plastic. Yeah, there's the rind underneath the plastic. Okay, got your rind. It's
sorry.
It's got it's very pungent aroma, very delightful. I mean, it's intoxicating, I would say.
I was going to say, if this is pungent, you're in for a treat when we move on.
Yeah, right. Because this is the mildest of them all. And it's milder because it's younger in terms of its aging, or something else?
I was going to say, there's two things that contribute to the more intensity of the cheese. How often it's washed, and how long it's washed. If you wash it every day for 3 months, it's going to be very strong. If you wash it once a week for 6 months, it'll be medium strong. If you wash it every day for a month and then once a week and then once a month and then let it dry out completely, you end up with Gruyere. That's how they do that one. But
Really? So this
amount,
could ultimately become Gruyere.
well, different. It's a softer design cheese. It's a semi-soft cheese, so it could become a Gruyere style if you let it age and dry.
I see.
Um,
Okay.
but this cheese has a wash rind on it, but it is very minimally washed.
Yeah. Oh, it's not overpowering or that strong. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you have the wash, what it produces is a beefy earthiness in the cheese. And that's what the monks were trying to replicate as they were replacing meat in their diet during religious and times of no meat. They wanted to have this meaty flavor, and meat at that time was gamey because they had no refrigeration. So they were trying to replicate the gaminess of meat in cheese, and that's where this came from. And when you taste it, it's buttery and creamy,
Very.
and the smell is always stronger than the flavor.
I get it. Yeah, the smell definitely dominates over the flavor.
Yep.
It's a very mild flavor, and is this one of the reasons why it's used so often as under the heat lamp as sort of a almost like a fondue type
No,
melter?
I got to say one thing. This cheese just coats your mouth. When you chew cheddar, it breaks down into little crumbly, creamy bits.
Yeah.
When you chew this, it becomes this beautiful paste that just glues your mouth shut.
Yeah, it's like eating a pat of butter.
Yes, it is. It is the texture on this cheese is what makes it so awesome for melting.
And it's a wonderful creamy texture, and also that buttery quality.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one and also a mild nutty
Mm-hmm.
aftertaste.
And the nuttiness comes from the cheese and from the wash. You got your beer, good man.
I have some hard cider.
Oh, excellent.
As my palate cleanser, some Samuel Smith's organic cider today. We're going to be doing a cider tasting show next week.
I love cider.
So I got this. I thought this would be a perfect accompaniment to the cheeses.
I've probably made 30 batches of cider. My beer making friend and I used to do cider about 4 times a year.
I love it.
I love cider.
And you're in apple country too.
Apples and pears, both. We did both. So that was raclette. That's the mildest one. It comes from the Alpine mountain range.
Yeah.
We call different countries the France or Switzerland or Austria. It's the Alps. They've been the Alps for a lot longer. They've been countries. So Taleggio comes from northern Italy. It's in the Alps. It comes Gruyere comes from eastern France. That's the Alps. Raclette comes from Switzerland. That's the Alps. They're all the Alps.
So that's what gives it the name Alpine when we say Alpine cheeses, and this is the style. The washed-rind is designed thing to that region.
That's one of the cheeses that is distinctive there. The one with the holes in it, the Emmental, is the other one that is distinctly mountain cheese. Or we associate with mountain cheese.
Is the Emmental and those kinds of what we call Swiss cheeses here, are they also washed-rind cheeses?
No, typically not. A traditional Emmental is not. There are a few companies that do wash-rind versions. There's one from Germany that's called Allgäuer Bergkäse. Bergkäse just means that big cheese. It's from the Allgäu region in the southern part of Germany in the Alps. And they do a wash-rind version of Emmental that is ripping strong, man. It's awesome cheese. I used to work with people that brought it into America, and it was awesome cheese.
So does that move it more towards the raclette or to the...
More towards Gruyere. It's more towards the Gruyere. It's even stronger than raclette. So,
okay.
So speaking of that, raclette is the one you just put in front of the fire, and it has so much moisture and fat, it'll just melt instantly. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to add anything to it. You just put it in front of heat and scrape it off, and it melts. That's why they do it at the après-ski meal is, raclette. Gruyere, you got to work a little bit more. You have to try a little bit harder. But this is the cheese that makes fondue taste good.
This is like the classic fondue cheese, right?
Yes. Well, typically, fondue is about as unique to each individual person, place, and canton as pasta sauce is in Italy. Every bomb makes their own, and of an average um, kind of Americanization of it is half Gruyere and half Emmental. But in Switzerland, you'll get Appenzeller and Emmental and Gruyere and a little Sprinz and a little, they'll put several, 3 or 4 or 5 cheeses in it.
What is Jarlsberg? That's another kind of Swiss cheese.
We won't talk about Jarlsberg.
Okay.
Jarlsberg is a Norwegian invention that was designed to capitalize on the popularity of cheeses with holes in it. There's more Jarlsberg produced in Norway than there is milk produced in Norway. So I'll leave you to decide where the milk actually comes from. Although Poland is right across.
Jarlsberg is the bad brother who
It's Jarlsberg is the Kraft of Europe. It's not bad cheese. And Kraft, back in the 60s when I grew up, Kraft was not bad cheese. It was just mass produced. It was not special. It was not unique. And Jarlsberg is produced by the freaking trainload. It is not a fun, unique cheese. It is a mass marketed, mass produced, high quality cheese. It's very well made. I will never knock the quality of that cheese. I just don't think it's anything special.
Gotcha. Sounds like it's like the Budweiser of cheeses.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. I'm getting the equivalencies here. Okay. I know the term Jarlsberg, but I never knew how that fit into the pantheon of Swiss.
It's a Swiss style cheese, meaning it's got the holes in it from the bacteria that produces that gas.
Yeah.
So it's a Swiss style cheese made in Norway to please the masses. It's designed, true Emmental has a real bite to it. And a lot of people, that's a little too strong. So they made it milder. French they do a couple versions in France that are also milder versions of those big eye cheeses, because some people just don't like that strong, intense, almost medicinal flavor you get out of Emmental.
And of course, today we're focusing on what we were calling the stinky cheeses. So we don't want that. So we want to go after the gusto here.
That's it, man. And so the Gruyere that we're talking about next is the one you should be trying now.
I'm holding it up. I'm holding up a piece. I already took a little bite, and I noticed that the first thing that I noticed in my bite of this Gruyere is that it does have those little crystals in it that I associated with cheddar. And
associated with cheddar just because that's the only cheese you're used to eating that's 2 years old. The tyrosine usually shows up in the body of a cheese anywhere from 16, 18 months up to 2 years. It'll start showing up. It's it's one of the amino acids and it kind of drops out of suspension and forms little crystals.
This cheese is so good, but it's so completely different.
Yes,
from the raclette.
Now this cheese, when the first gig I did in the cheese industry was with a friend of mine. We were at the Monterey Wine Festival for the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board. I had never done anything in cheese before in my life. I had orange and white. That's what I knew about it. And we got up at 4:00 in the morning to cut up cheese for this big event. And we're cutting up 70 different cheeses. 70. I didn't know there were 70 cheeses in the world at that time.
Yeah.
And the first cheese I cut up was Gruyere. It was a called Surchoix Gruyere from Rothcase in Wisconsin, which is an award-winning Gruyere. I'd never had anything like that before. Before 5:00, I was absolutely in the bathroom, sick to my stomach. I ate so much cheese in the first hour of cutting up that cheese. I tasted everything I cut, and I cut like 20 different cheeses.
Wow.
But the one that I will always remember as my very favorite of the whole group was a Gruyere. This is the cheese that turned me on to specialty cheese.
Well,
I still love this cheese.
It's fantastic, and it's and again, the aroma, the smell is much stronger than the taste. The taste is milder than the smell, but the smell itself smells like, if I had to just categorize it, I'd say it smells like dirty socks.
That's exactly what it is. It's the same bacteria that creates if you think about it, it's the bacteria that lives in dampness.
Surprise.
It lives in every place in humans that are damp.
Here we can deploy that, what we normally put in the washing machine,
right?
we can deploy that to create a flavored cheese that is intoxicating. It's so good.
Absolutely. And it just, this cheese just melts in your mouth. It's got those little, like you say, it's got little cheese diamonds in it, cheese crystals, but it has such a depth of flavor. And about 2/3 of the way being through your chew, you breathe across and it just becomes fruity instantaneously. You get this huge burst of fruit flavor. And now that you get it really strong just before you swallow it, it becomes really tropical fruity. And that is one of the things that I absolutely love in this cheese.
And again, that fruitiness is a result of the bacterial fermentation. It's pulling those flavors out of the milk.
It's taking a basic building block of protein and cutting this little piece of it that has an ester like this fruit, and this little piece that has the ester of this fruit, and puts them all together. Parmesan, if you get a really good 2-year-old Parmesan and bust it open fresh, it smells like pineapple upside down cake.
Yes.
Absolutely smells like caramelized pineapple. Bang, immediately. And it's the same enzyme. It's exactly the same enzyme.
Interesting. But this cheese is made with a full fat milk. Would you say it's a whole milk?
Oh, definitely.
Whereas and Parmesan and the hard cheeses are usually made with a low fat or skim.
Parmesan is made with part skim. Most of the others are whole milk. Asiago, Piave Vecchio, those are all whole milk. Parmesan is one. That's why it's the best at grading, because it's low moisture and dry. I mean, and low fat, low moisture.
Yeah. It's all in that fat. Yeah.
The Gruyere. What was I going to say? God, that cheese is good. I had some melt on Gruyere, I was going to say, but I don't remember. It'll come back or not. But Gruyere is the one that, that's what I was going to say. Emmental, the one with the holes in it, that is made with part skim milk. That's why it's so rubbery when you chew on Swiss.
I see.
Because it's high protein. And that's why you'll never see Swiss cheese on a pizza menu, because when Emmental cools down after you've melted it, it becomes shoe leather, and you can't chew it worth damn. So it's terrible on cold pizza, and a lot of people eat cold pizza. So you never see Emmental.
Though
the Gruyere works great.
Would stay soft.
So absolutely.
So would this be like Gruyere be like a classic Swiss grilled cheese sandwich cheese? Would that be?
You could certainly use it on grilled cheese sandwich. This is the one that you'll usually find on true French onion soup is Gruyere. Cheap people put provolone or mozzarella on it. That's not classic. Classic is Gruyere, and actually young Gruyere, not aged Gruyere, typically on that. But it is any place. Grilled cheese sandwich would be great. I've made mac and cheese with it. Anything you can do with a melting cheese, you can do with this cheese. If it's too strong, blend it. That's why you blend cheeses. If you want a little hint of it, then go with, 80% of your whatever, mild cheddar or Monterey Jack, and then 20% of your Gruyere. And that'll give you that flavor without A, breaking the bank, and B, without overpowering the taste of the dish.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it for a less sophisticated palate who's not looking for those flavors. So you can blend it down and, in a sense, dilute the intensity.
Exactly.
Let's
move on.
Those two cheeses that we just tasted were both pretty firm.
Yes.
The two cheeses that I'm holding on to next are both very soft.
Right.
So which one should we cut into next?
I would cut into the Willoughby next.
Okay, here's my Willoughby, and it's
this one,
it looks like a little baby brie without the fuzz.
And this is all dependent upon the age of your wheel. Mine, I happen to know that they just got this order in, so mine is about as young as you're ever going to see it. And if you look at mine, you see the open holes.
Yes,
that shows me that it's fairly young. Yours, you see how it has less open holes? They started to close up, some of them.
So it closes up with age then.
Absolutely. It gets softer and breaks down, and it becomes more liquid as it ages.
And if I let it continue to age to where could it become creamy like an aged brie?
If you had not cut it and you'd
Yeah.
kept it in the right conditions, you could have done that. But once you
Now
cut
that
it,
I've cut it, it's too late for that.
done. It's over.
Uh, but it's still pretty soft and creamy in the center. I
Yep.
can see it's liquidy almost. Yeah.
Yep. Now smell.
Yeah.
What does it smell like?
It's the totally different aroma from the Gruyere.
It's a little earthy, but it's also grassy, wouldn't you say?
I'm starting to get the grass notes.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking, I guess my mind was trying to go to see if I could see any fruity notes, but I'm not getting that.
Not yet. No, you won't get them usually in this one in the aroma. If you get anything, you'll get a little flavor, but mostly this one, you're going to get grassy. You'll get a lot of almost a hazelnutty aroma to it,
Yeah, the nutty. I'm getting the nutty. Yeah, yeah.
but it's very mild compared to the other ones. And now
Yes,
taste this one. Eat it with the rind on.
Oh man,
Wow.
that is so good.
Yeah. In the words of Beavis and Butthead, that doesn't suck.
So number one, it's super buttery. It's creamy. It's all good out.
Yep. Now mine is young enough that right about now, I get an acidic little bite at the back.
And it's changing in my mouth as well, but mine's aged more, and it is getting a little more fruity.
A little fruity and a little tart. You get a little tartness in the back of the throat.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's
It's definitely creamy. If I hadn't cut into it, I probably could have set it on the counter for a day or two and then just scooped it out with the.
if you ever get another one like that, just leave it in the meat and cheese drawer because that's higher moisture. That's why it's called meat and cheese. Leave it in there in its wrap, original wrap, and leave it in there. If it's this young, leave it in there for at least 2 weeks and turn it over about once a week and then smell it through the plastic. If you can't really smell it strong, leave it in for another week. Feel what the texture is. You'll see it getting softer and softer from the edge on, where you poke on the edge. And when it gets creamy, bust it open, you're going to have a very different cheese. It loses the grassy notes and it picks up a whole lot of beefy notes at that point. But when it's young like this, I love the grassy notes that it has.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, when you say beefy too, the first word that comes to my mind is kind of umami.
Yep.
Flavor profile. So
Yep.
that kind of that's again part of the action on the proteins, the fermentation on the proteins, creating this umami. Because I mean, it is richer than any meat. It's richer than a steak. As far
Yep.
as that.
Umami, the strongest measured umami in any edible product that I'm aware of was in soy sauce, has the strongest.
Yeah.
But as far as food that you eat, Roquefort blue cheese, sheep's milk blue cheese is right at the top of the list. And cheeses in general are very high in umami. And umami is protein. It is one of the stages of protein breaking down. And it triggers in our brains that umami means tasty. Because umami is what happens to meat when you cook it. Raw meat has very low umami.
Yeah.
Cooked meat has very high umami. When you brown a steak, it's the browning process, the Maillard reaction that produces that intense umami. All meat has some umami flavor. I don't want to say none, but the umami is intensified 1,000-fold by browning. And cheese doesn't need that. It's fermented. So it's gone through something. It's already changed. It picked up that umami breakdown of the protein by its aging process. And that's why cheese delivers so much umami instantly. As soon as you taste it, you smell it, you get that umami rush.
Well, during the many years that I was a vegetarian, but I was not a vegan. I was vegetarian, and my go-to was always cheese. I had a hard time ever conceiving of life without cheese because that met all my needs that I was, we would thought I needed for meat. But I didn't know why. I didn't have the language or the terminology back then. I'm talking about 50 years ago.
Right.
But now I understand so much better why.
Well, and I will. I have a real problem with bandwagon jumper honors of vegan, vegetarian, who just, I mean, I've been in grocery stores and had people walk up to me when I was doing demos in the early days, and these anorexic women would come up and tell me, "Oh, how can you do that? You're working for cheese," and I'm vegan, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm an earthling. Where's Vega?" Um, but I then you would look at them and they're wearing a leather freaking belt, carrying a leather purse and leather shoes. And I'm like, you're a walking contradiction. The ones that lived it, I totally get it. I will support them forever, man. The people that do it stupidly, I have no patience for. And the thing about, especially vegan, is it possible to get a very healthy diet eating vegan? You bet. Is it way more challenging than it is if you have a broad-based diet like humans have been doing for 3 million years? Yeah. Um, if we were designed to eat nothing but roughage, we wouldn't have these teeth in the front, They would be kind of useless at that point. That's for cutting meat. We're designed to eat some sort of meat and some sort of vegetables and lots of nuts and fruits and seeds because they stored well and they didn't fight back when you harvested them.
Yeah.
So humans have been eating that mix of diet for 3 million years. I'm sorry, your latest fad is not going to change how humans work.
Well, as we say, we can applaud the effort and
Yes.
and maybe bring some wisdom and knowledge to the effort, so that you're not just jumping on a bandwagon.
Yeah,
And because it could be dangerous to your health if you don't know what you're doing.
yes. And if you are a vegan and you absolutely can't stand the fact that we hurt animals, because we do. Killing them is hurtful. I'm sorry, it just is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it. I get that, and I support that if you want to do that. It's the ones that don't understand and they just jump on it without even knowing what they're talking about. I have no patience for that.
Well,
Um,
we have to chalk it up to the part of their learning curve, and that's why we do shows like this, is to help
That's right.
educate. So we got
So
one more.
let's
cheese
move on.
and I'm pretty excited about this. This is the one that is filling my office here, where I'm broadcasting from, with a very ripe, rich aroma.
Yes. Taleggio is one of the oldest. The Pliny the Elder in the first century BC or AD wrote about cheeses that were probably Taleggio. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, that is intoxicating. And they all have an indentation from where they put a branding mark on them.
Oh yeah, I see it now. Yeah.
Yeah, that says Taleggio. It sells a Taleggio, DOP Taleggio. All have that.
So where is Colegio from?
Northern Italy. It's a northern Italian. From the southern part of the Alps there in the northern Italy, and it dates back to at least the 9th century, 800s or so. So it's within a couple hundred years of the cheese family being invented, Taleggio was being made. The process of making a washed-rind cheeses from that original kind of accidental, intentional, whatever discovery in Alsace-Lorraine spread around all of the monks in Europe within decades, and they were all making washed-rind cheeses because it's meaty as can be. It's absolutely meaty. And if you had a week that you couldn't eat meat, well, this is your next best thing.
And that's why some of the fasts, like in the Eastern Orthodox fast, you have to give up cheese also.
Yep.
Because you might as well, if you're going to give up meat, you got to give up cheese too, because otherwise it's not a real fast.
That's why I'm not an Eastern Orthodox. In fact, that's why I'm not practicing anything.
You would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. But I'm noticing one thing as I'm tasting it. The cheese itself, the internal part of the cheese, is soft and creamy and very flavorful. But the rind
is ripping.
Is like on another level altogether. It's like the inside, but on steroids.
Right. And you can trim the rind on it. It is totally edible. Some people like the rind. To me, that's kind of a waste. But if you don't like it, you can always trim it off.
But the rind is where, it's kind of like, this is where the real action is.
Yep. And that's where, like I said, the super complex food chemistry going on. That rind is where it's happening. All of it.
Oh my God.
And this, the one difference in the texture on this, I don't know if you noticed it, The first cheese we ate was turned into like paste and stuck to your teeth instantly. It was gummy as can be. The Gruyere was softer and creamier and melted in your mouth,
Uh-huh.
but kind of in chunks at a time as it went down. And then it became creamy at the end. The Willoughby was soft and gooey and melting immediately. This one is quite elastic. It's got quite an elastic, it's creamy as can be, but it has more of an elastic texture
It's
and
bouncy.
it doesn't stick to your teeth like the first one does. It's
That's
creamy,
interesting.
but it doesn't stick to your teeth for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, and if it was sticking to my teeth, that would be more a function of the fat, would you say?
They're identical, virtually identical fat. It's how the cheese body has broken down.
And again, all of these, I guess, are there certain bacterial colonies are introduced at the early stages of these cheese productions, and they're probably different, right, based on
Yes,
the region where it came from, what was common, what was captured there in their starters, so to speak.
right. Well, originally, every cheesemaker had their own starter culture, just like you have your own bread
Yeah,
starter.
yeah,
And every day they would take some out and make the cheese with it, and feed the what's left so that it would have stuff for the next day. And they would take some of the whey out it from today and add it into that for tomorrow. And that was how they got the right bacteria, was by replicating it right on site. The problem was if you had a phage outbreak or something like that, and it just wiped every bug out in your place,
yeah.
you had no starter culture and you could not replicate it very well. There has been modern companies go out of business because they could not replicate it after a problem like that.
Well,
So
it's such a fascinating world,
yeah,
and it's kind of like like if you're into bread making, then inevitably you want to get into beer making, and if you're into beer making, you want to either get into wine making or cheese making. I went the other way. I started out, believe it or not, 45 years ago as a cheesemaker, wanting to be a cheesemaker. I was a cheesemaker wannabe, but when I was trying to get certified for the spot that we were going to make it in, the restrictions and the regulations were so severe that I said, this is too much for me. I can't handle this. I'm going to go to bread. It's so much less restrictive. And so I moved from cheese into bread. And
wow.
then, but now I feel like coming back because cheese is, to me, is the most fascinating, most, what's the word? It's alchemical process. There's almost a magic to it.
It's
Anything with
alchemy. I
fermentation.
call it alchemy.
Yeah. And alchemy is I think, again, it's an imprecise word, so to speak, because it can mean so many different things to different people, but it captures the magic of the
Yeah,
process.
yeah,
And when we went to the fermentation festival in Wisconsin a few years ago, and there was somebody there on every aspect of fermentation, from sauerkraut to bread to cheese to wine.
yeah,
It's like we're talking about the same thing, only the application of microorganisms to a different food source to
yeah.
create an amazing flavor outcome. So,
Well,
uh,
Mike, I bought myself a pH meter, and my next venture now that I am digging bread is lacto fermentation of vegetables. That will be my next big fun. I'm going to learn lacto fermentation on all different types of vegetables. Can't wait. Pickling
Well,
stuff.
over the next couple of days, I'm going to be not only learning about this level of cheese making that we talked about today, but also ciders. And I'm going to be on somebody else's podcast, on a podcast called Beer Sessions, and we're going to be talking about beer and how it relates to pizza. So, and again, it always comes down to fermentation. If you just add one big word to call it, cover everything,
Yep.
fermentation is where it's at, and it's fascinating and wonderful. And I think I really appreciate you kind of expanding my understanding of what's going on in this particular, corner of the fermentation world, because it's got to be more than 500 types of cheeses even. I mean,
Oh,
there's
thousands. There's
probably an
three plus
infinite number of
thousand.
ways to ferment milk. And then we haven't even talked about goat milk and sheep's milk and other kinds of fermented milk products as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we ferment grain to make beer. There's a lot of historical speculation now that agriculture actually started as a way to make enough grain to make beer. Had nothing to do with bread. Bread was an afterthought. Bread was something we figured out afterwards, but it was beer. It was the thing we wanted to be able to make beer all year long, that it kicked off agriculture.
think
And I find that a fascinating theory.
I believe that. I think a lot of that goes into Egypt and the
Yep,
Mesopotamian areas and all. And yeah, yeah. And you get the feeling that bread came about because the beer maker fell asleep under the hot Egyptian sun and dried out, and he was left with this cakey stuff. So they called it bread.
that's it, man. It got dry, they ground it up and said, well, what happens if we put water on it? It makes it better, you know?
So,
Maybe
so
we
Mark,
put
I
it on
got
a
one final
pot.
question for you before we call it a day, because
Yep.
uh, this has been overwhelmingly delicious and informative. Um, where do we go from here? We covered a lot of different categories. What have we not covered in the cheese world that we can have you back for? We'll have you back for mushrooms for sure when you give me the word that mushrooms are in.
Hi.
But what other cheese categories have we not explored that you think we
Well,
need to get
there's
to?
we haven't done straight up just fresh cheeses. There's a whole lot of fresh cheeses that are a lot of fun. From fromage blanc and creme fraiche and different types of fresh cheese and fresh dairy products that are very much fun. There is blue cheese. We've not done blue to my knowledge yet.
Oh,
And there's a huge range. You think there's a lot of different flavor variation and things like cheddar? Wait till you taste 5 different blue cheeses.
let's do blue because
Okay.
that you just touched on something that people have asked me that I couldn't answer, which is how are these different blue cheeses different from each other, and what makes them different, and what are the flavor differences?
I'll tell you what, man. We'll I may have to ship you one cheese that's made local here. There's a gorgonzola that's made local here.
Really?
It doesn't really taste like gorgonzola, but it is one of the great blue cheeses I've had in America so far.
Wow, who's
And
making that locally?
it's called a little company called Valley Ford Cheese Company, and they make they're famous for a Montasio style cheese. It's called Highway One. No, call it's I'm sorry, Estero Gold, and then they make a cheese almost like the raclette, like a fontina, a wash-rind fontina called Highway One, and then the cheese maker, the son Joe, got a wild hair that he wanted to do a blue cheese, and I worked with him. I mean, I tasted. I didn't work with him. He let me taste it as he matured it, and he went through probably 20 different types of cheeses. And I kept saying, "This one's great. Make this one. That would sell." And he's like, "No, I want it more like this." So he went through all these different iterations and came out with one that they call Grazing Gals, because they're all grass-fed Jersey cows. And I'm telling you, dude, it is rich and earthy like a blue cheese ought to be, man.
Incredible. Well,
So
so
we can do the blue, and I'll ship you some of that.
we'll plan on that one. So folks, join us again with Mark Todd, the cheese dude, when we dive deep into the blue cheese world, which is one of the other categories that we still there's got to be many different niches within cheese that we can explore, and I'm happy to do it as often as you're willing to come back and do it
You
with
bet.
me.
Blue
So
cheese is my favorite category by far.
awesome. All right. Well, Mark Todd, the cheese dude, thank you so much. Do if people want to continue to follow you, I know you live out in the woods. Do you do any social media? Are you posting
On
anywhere?
Instagram, Mark Todd
You would try to.
dude on Instagram.
Okay, the cheese dude. It's the cheese dude.
It's actually Mark Todd the cheese dude, because I didn't realize when I signed up that people were going to have to type it in, so I stupidly put a long one in there. My fault.
Just in case there were any other cheese dudes, they'll get to the
Exactly.
right cheese dude.
That's it. Mark Todd, the cheese dude. You will see me there, and posts from all over the world where I'm having fun in Dubai and Singapore and wherever I'm at the time.
Wow. Well, fantastic. Well, Mark, thanks for sharing all your knowledge, your passion, and these cheeses with us. And,
Absolutely.
all of
I
you-
love what you do. I love what you do. I like the fact that you educate the people. That if you look at my house, I have a big banner that says "Bringing quality cheese, wine, and beer to the masses." You help do that. You help in that goal of my life.
You
I
help
want everybody to
do
love
what
it.
I'm trying to do. Yeah, and then this is cool, finding people of like mind and kindred spirits, we call them,
Yep.
to share, and we're building a community of
Yep.
like-minded people. So, Mark, thanks so much, and all of you, thank you for joining us on Pizza Quest. Continue to come back. We'll be posting new shows every week, and probably our next show will be on hard cider.
I'll look
Mark,
for it.
we'll see. I'll be in touch with the for the mushroom show, and then we'll set a date for the blue cheese show.
Sounds great, Peter. Have a great one.